Okay, let's get started. Welcome everyone to today's webinar, part of our Zenfi Automation Stories series. My name is Aravin and I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Zenfi. Today I'm going to show you how you can easily automate a process, enhance it to gain insights into the process, and visualize them all using Zenfi. The process we are going to look at today is employee onboarding, which is a very common process in most organizations. We will have time for a Q&A at the end of the webinar. However, please feel free to submit your questions in the chat throughout this webinar, and we'll do our best to get to those as well. So one might ask, why should you automate your process to begin with? So if we take employee onboarding, it's a complex process that involves different departments in your organization. It has time-sensitive administrative tasks and ongoing communication with all parties. The routine part of this process consists of going back and forth between dozens of sheets, emails, documents, which can be overwhelming. Not to mention that there are chances for human error, missing deadlines, and dissatisfied managers and employees, which can contribute to retention issues. As you know, research suggests that employees form their opinion of a company on the very first day. That's why it is important to give the best possible experience to the employee on the first day as well as the lead up to that. For example, we want to make sure the documents are sent out and signed in a timely manner. Any equipment the employee might need are procured and ready on their first day. Meetings are set up, welcome packs are sent out, etc. So automating this process can reduce all these manual efforts and help to streamline and optimize the process. So for those who are new to the platform, I would like to take this opportunity to give you a quick overview of what Zenfi is. So Zenfi is a no-code automation platform that is built for Google Workspace and runs on Google Cloud. With Zenfi, you can easily automate your business processes with a few drag and drop without having to write any code. Since Zenfi is built for Google Workspace, it has tight integration with most of the Google Workspace apps such as Drive, Gmail, Docs, Sheets, just to name a few. On top of Google Workspace apps, Zenfi also has connectors into other third-party systems like Salesforce, HubSpot, SendGrid, DocuSign, etc. So this allows you to leverage your existing investments in the tools that you're already familiar with. Zenfi has all the necessary components to automate any kind of business processes that you might come across in your organization. For example, leave requests, expense approvals, generating quotes and proposals, working from home agreements, or employee onboarding, offboarding scenarios, just to name a few. So when it comes to automating a process in Zenfi, what we say is if you can lay out your process in a flowchart, you can automate it with Zenfi. So for today's challenge, we're going to look at employee onboarding. So our scenario would be HR needs to be able to initiate an employee onboarding process. Then we'll have to generate an offer letter. We'll get the manager's approval. Then once the manager approves, we're going to send the offer letter to the candidate and get their acceptance. Once the candidate accepts the offer, we want to do some internal tasks such as assign a task to IT to like set up the user account, request equipment like laptops, and also perform things like background checks, etc. And finally, once all of those things are completed, we want to send the welcome pack out to the employee. So how do we go about automating this with Zenfi? So the first step is to translate the various steps of the process into a high-level flowchart. This allows us to identify key steps of the process and the sequence of events that need to happen. So once we have a good idea of the flow, the next step is to automate it with Zenfi. So once we have successfully automated the process, we would like to get insights into the process so that we can answer questions like, what stage is Jane's application at? Or how many candidates are starting next month? So for this, we'll be using Zenfi tables to track key metrics that are important for our process. And finally, we would like to visualize them using dashboards so others can easily interact with it and gain insights into the process. So the first step is to create a high-level flowchart. So I have created a simple flowchart that illustrates a scenario. So you can see it starts by when an HR person initiates an employee onboarding. We generate the offer letter. It's sent to the manager. If the manager approves it, we send the offer letter to the candidate. And when the candidate accepts it, then we have to perform some internal tasks such as creating a user account, requesting any hardware such as laptops, etc., performing background checks. And once all of these tasks are completed, we will send a welcome pack to the employee and the process terminates. Now let's see how we can automate all of this using Zenfi. Let me switch over to Zenfi. So this is a Zenfi workspace. So the way you automate a process in Zenfi is by creating a flow. So I go to the create button and say select flow. Now the first thing we need to do is choose how the flow will be started. So we call them triggers in Zenfi. So there are various ways that flow can be initiated in Zenfi. So you can start a flow when someone submits a Google form, or when you can monitor a email inbox, and when an email arrives, you can automatically kickstart a process. Similarly, you can monitor a folder, and when someone uploads a file, you could kickstart a process. You can also start process on a schedule, like for example, every Friday at 5 p.m. You can start flows on demand. So these are great for ad hoc processes. You could even start a flow when someone submits a type form. And we also support HTTP webhooks as well as a mechanism for you to integrate with other systems as well. On top of that, we also have other triggers such as stable action and Zenfi, built-in Zenfi forms as well. So for this scenario, for this process, we're going to use Google Forms. So I'm going to come here and click on create on the Google Forms trigger. So this is the Zenfi Flow Designer, and this is the canvas. This is the place where you will be dragging and dropping and building out your process as a flowchart and automating it. On your left-hand side, you can see the toolbox. So you can see various actions that we have grouped under different categories. Because we are built for Google Workspace, you can see we have extensive coverage of Google Workspace products, like for example, Google Drive, Google Doc, Sheets, as well as other third-party systems as well, like DocuSign, Adobe Sign, Salesforce, Slack, SendGrid, etc. Now, for us to automate the process, we need a few assets to help us out. So I have created a folder in Google Drive to put everything in one place. The first thing is we need a Google form so that the HR person can fill that and kickstart the process. So I have created an employee onboarding form. It's a very simple Google form with a few questions: first name, last name, personal email address of the candidate, and information about the role, right? So you can make it as complex as you need it to be. Then the next step is for us to generate an offer letter. So I have already created a offer letter template. So document generation in Zenfi is really easy. All you need to do is just create a template in Google Doc, and whatever values that you want to replace, you just put them in curly brackets. So you can see I have the current date here, full name, have the position, start date, manager, and a place for them to sign as well. So you can have your own branding, own formatting, etc. Now, let me switch back into Zenfi, and I'm going to configure the trigger. So you can see a warning symbol here that indicates that the trigger is not yet configured. So I'll click on it to bring up this settings panel. So the first thing that we need to do is establish a connection to Google Forms. So connections are the mechanisms of how Zenfi interacts with another system. So you can grant specific or the least privilege rights that you would require. So here I have already I have a connection already here, but if you don't have a connection, you can hit the plus button and basically click on authorize, and you can follow the Google OAuth prompt here. And once you complete it, we will establish a trust relationship with Google and manage that connection for you. Because I already have a connection, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to cancel out. So I'm going to select this connection. And the next step for me is to select the form. So I'll use this drive picker, and I will say my form is in this folder, and I'll select my form. So you can see the instant I chose my form, Zenfi is going and analyzing the form, and it knows that there is a field called first name, last name, personal email address, role information, etc. Now, this is an important concept in Zenfi. We call it strongly typed. So every action and trigger knows what output it produces so that you can use those in subsequent steps. Right. So now that we have our first step configured, what we need to do is when someone submits this form, we want to be able to generate the offer letter. So let me come into the Google Docs category, and I will drag drop this action called generate document using template. I will hit the settings button to open up the settings, and then I will rename this to say generate offer letter. And again, I already have a connection established, so I need to select the template. So I'll just quickly jump into this folder and select the offer letter template. So similar to the forms, you can see when you select the template, Zenfi automatically goes and analyzes the document and says, hey, I have found these 6 placeholders. So there's something for current date, full name, position, start date, manager, and salary. Now, in the value text box, I can provide replacement values so that when this flow runs, it will automatically replace this current date with whatever you put in here. So I could come here and say, for example, hard-coded value such as August 18, 2022. Or sometimes I might have to use dynamic values. Like for example, for this full name, we know that in our Google form we have these properties called first name and last name that we capture about the candidate. So I want to use whatever values someone has entered in here to replace that placeholder. So what I can do is wherever you can see this icon, it means you can insert dynamic tokens. So I click that and I say, go to the trigger, grab hold of the first name, put a space, and then insert the last name. So it's basically first name space last name will be the full name. Now for the position, I will do the same thing. I have a title here and start date. Again, I have a start date here, manager, the hiring manager name, and for the salary, I can say the annual compensation. There we go. So we have now replaced or provided replacement values for all the tokens in the template. Then we need to specify which folder this new document is going to get generated and stored. So for every time the flow runs, a new document will get created. So what I'm going to say is place this inside this folder where I have created a folder called generated. Now I need to give it a name. So I'm going to use the candidate's first name and last name so that it'll be a unique document for every candidate that that we run this flow for. So for that, I'll go into the trigger and say first name space last name space offer letter. So whatever I specify for first name and last name, it'll be named that space offer letter for the new document that gets created. I'm also going to say I also want a PDF created so that I can send it as an attachment. So perfect. So now that we have completed this step, then we'll move on to the next step. So the next step would be once the offer letter is generated, we need to send that for approval to the manager. So I'll come back here into the user interaction category and I'll drag drop this assign task. So assign task is the mechanism where we can request human input. So in here, I will rename this step to be manager approver. And for the task name, I will say approved candidate. And for the task description, I will come and say hello and manager's name. Now I can use the token picker, but that's a shorthand as well. If I press the @ symbol, I can inline select the tokens that I have. So I can come and say I want the hiring manager's name. So it'll be hello hiring manager. And for the body, I will just say, please find the offer letter for the first name of the candidate for the position of title. This is the role that we are hiring them for. Great. Now, for the assignee's email, so this will be the manager email. Now, for this demonstration purposes, I'm just going to hard code this value, but in Zenfi, you can imagine you could use a Google directory action to automatically look up the manager by the department or something and automatically get that value. But for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to hard code it to this person. And for the subject, I'll just copy the task name in here. And for the email body, I'm just going to copy the same thing. So they get the same thing in the email. Now, for the attachments, I want to send the PDF that we created as part of the offer letter. So I'll select that. I'm not going to configure any expiry or reminders, but you can configure them so that they get reminder notifications and you can automatically expire this task after X number of days, for example. But for this demonstration purpose, I'm not going to do that. The important thing is we need to configure outcomes. So by default, you have two outcomes here. So the manager can either approve or reject. You can add any number of outcomes that you want, but for this demonstration purposes, these two are sufficient for us. So that means we have completed configuration of this action. So the next thing is once the manager approves the task, because now they have two options, either they can approve it or reject it. So we need to check after this, has the manager approved this task? So the way that we do that is with a control flow statement, a branching statement called if condition. So I can drag drop this, and basically I can build a condition here to say if the outcome of the previous task is equal to approve, then go through the true branch. Otherwise, go through the false branch. So if the manager approves, then we want to continue with the process. But if the manager doesn't approve, it's going to go to the false branch. So I'm not going to do anything here, but you could imagine we can send an email back to HR saying for whatever reason the manager has declined this, and they can follow up with them. So if the manager approves it, then what we want to do is we want to send the offer letter to the candidate so that they can accept it and sign it. So for this, let's use the DocuSign action. So rather than sending the PDF to them and asking them to sign it and upload it, we will just use an e-signature action so that they can sign it directly, and then we'll get the signed file. So I can come here and say, I'll drag drop the e-sign DocuSign envelope. So I can come and say e-sign contract or offer letter. And for the document, in the first step, when we generated the offer letter, we also created a PDF file. So I'm going to select the PDF file there. For the email subject, I would say, welcome to Acme. So that's a fictional company. And I'm not going to type anything in the email message. So it's going to be the default email message, but you can put whatever you want in there. And the next thing is, what is the full name? So I will say the first name and then last name of the candidate. The email would be the personal email address of the candidate. And we have to define two fields. Basically, there has to be a field for them to sign, and also we want to collect the date where they signed as well. So for this, I have done a small trick here. So as you can see, if I highlight this, I have actually added a placeholder here called sign in two square brackets and date in two square brackets. I've just made it white so that you can't see it. So this is a trick that DocuSign recommends for us to define where the signatures will be placed. So I'll just do that. So let me just come here just to confirm. Perfect. Right. Now let me come back here. So the placeholder for the signature field was called sign. And I will also add another placeholder for the sign date called date. And I'm going to call this sign date. Perfect. So now we have configured this action. So this will use DocuSign to send the offer letter to the candidate, and the candidate can sign the document. Now, once the candidate has signed it, we need to check if they have actually accepted the offer, because they can also reject it in DocuSign. So I will do the same thing as we did before. I'll use an if condition here, and I will come here and configure that to say when the e-sign offer letter's outcome, so see the possible values are completed, declined, and voided. So I would say when the outcome is equal to completed, so that means the candidate has accepted and signed the document. So I will call this accept offer. So if they have accepted the offer, what we want to do is we want to save the signed file in our folder for record keeping purposes. So I'll come into the Google Drive category, and I will select the save file action. Again, I have a connection already set up. So for the file, I will come and say, give me the payload, which is the signed document from the e-sign offer letter action. And where do I want to place it? For this demo, I'm just going to place it inside the generated folder. But you can also imagine where every time you are onboarding a candidate, you could create a candidate specific folder and upload all the assets, the generated documents in there. Now, once I've saved the folder, I have to go and perform all of those internal tasks that we discussed before. So one thing I want to point out here is all these actions execute sequentially. So that means generate offer is going to happen. Then after that, manager approval, it's going to wait for the manager to approve. Then the if condition is going to run, then so on and so forth. But for a difference, what we're going to say is the next set of actions, we want all of them to run in parallel, because we don't want to wait and do it one after the other. So in here, we want to do three things. So we want to create an account. We want to request equipment. And I'll also add another branch to say background check. Perfect. So what we'll do is in the create user account, I'm going to use a Google Tasks action, and I'm going to create a task for our IT department. Now, this is just an example of using Google Tasks. This could be you could assign a task from Zenfi, or if you're using Asana or ClickUp, you can assign using that. So Zenfi has the full flexibility of how you would like to monitor your process, and you can do that in Zenfi. So for this demonstration purposes, I'm just going to pick the task list of this ordinary Clarkson person, just to keep it simple. And for the title, I will say create account for first name, and in the notes I will say first name is first name and last name, and I will also say department which department they're being hired into, and also role is title. I'm assuming the IT would require all of this information in order to properly provision the account. So that is done. I will do a similar thing for them to procure the equipment. So I will call them create account for this task. And then for this task, I will say procure equipment. And again, I'm going to pick the task list I'm going to create. And I will come here and say procure equipment for the candidate. And in the notes, I'm going to tell them what type of equipment they need. So we had a input called laptop preference in the form. So I'm going to tell them basically purchase that laptop. Now that's done. The next step is for the background check. So here I want to demonstrate something different. So I'll come to the user interaction category and drag drop a request data action. Now, a request data allows you to collect information from within the flow. So this is similar to the assign task, but whereas here you can have more options or rich inputs so that the user can complete them. So what I can do is I'll open up the settings, and then first let's go and configure the form. So I have opened up the form. So now this is very similar to Google Forms. So if you're familiar with Google Forms, you should be at home here. So I'll give it a title. I will say background check for, and I'll put the first name in. And then I just want to have two questions. So the first, I will say outcome, and I will make this a choice, and I'll just say pass and fail, just as an example. And also, I want them to be able to upload the certificate that they get when they do the background check. So I'll mark this as file upload, and I'll call this certificate, and I'll say maximum number of files is just one. Everything else can stay as default. Right, so now that I have configured this, then I need to specify who this form is sent out to. Again, for this demonstration purposes, I'm going to just assign it to Audrey Clarkson. You also have, you can assign this to multiple people. And if you do, then you have options as how the task is completed. So if you have multiple people, if the first person responds, then the task is completed, or you can wait till everyone responds, or you can say 2 out of 3 people need to respond. So you have full flexibility in how you're configuring it. In this case, because there's only one person, we just say when they respond. Again, you can configure reminders and expiry, but for this demonstration, I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to come and remove the reminder email and expiry email notifications. And I will just configure the main notification to say, rather than your input check, I'll say background check for first name. And they'll have to perform the background check however they're doing, and then use this link to let us know if it's pass or fail, and also upload the certificate. Perfect. So now I'll rename this to background check. So now the background check is completed. I want to save the certificate into the folder as well. So I'll come back into Google Drive, and I will use the save file action, and the connection is already set for the file. I'll come here and say in the background check, I'm gonna have a field called certificate. So I'm gonna upload the certificate there, and for the destination folder, I'm gonna say just put it in the same generated folder for now. Again, this could be a candidate specific folder, but just for this demonstration purposes, I'm just gonna place it there. So the next step after that would be for us to send the welcome email, right? So I have in my drive, I have a welcome pack here. So with some sample emails, so you can imagine this could be anything, any helpful information that you might want to send to the candidate. So what I'll do is I'll use a Gmail send email action here, and I will say send welcome email. And who do we want to send it to? So this would be the candidate's personal email address. And for the subject, I'm just going to say welcome to Acme. And I will say hello, first name. We are excited to have you on board. Here are some helpful information to get you started. Regards, HR. I also want to attach that PDF file that I showed you that we have in the drive. So what I'll do for that is I will jump back into the Google Drive category and use the read item information action so that I can get hold of that file. So again, I'll use the drive picker. I will jump into our webinar folder and select welcome pack. Perfect. Now, in here, I'll go to the attachment section of the send email, and I will say from the previous action that I had, which I'm reading the information about that file, I just want to get the file contents so that I can attach it here. So perfect. So we have configured the send email action as well. So if I zoom out a bit, you can see first someone will submit the Google form, and when they do, we are going to generate the offer letter. We're going to assign a task to the manager so that they can approve it. So if they approve, we are going to use DocuSign to send the offer letter to the candidate so that they can fill it out. If they accept the offer, we're going to save the signed document in our folder for record keeping purposes. And parallelly, we want to inform IT to create an account and also procure equipment, as well as someone in the HR team to go and perform background checks and upload the certificate that they get from the background check. We're going to save the certificate inside the same generated folder. Once all of those are completed, we're going to get hold of the welcome pack assets and then send an email to the candidate, basically welcoming them and sending whatever contents, the resources that we want to send. Now you can imagine we can easily extend this. For example, we can also use Slack to send a notification to our team to say, hey, this person is joining on this date. We could easily create a one-on-one calendar invite with them, with the manager. All of that is a easy drag and drop and configuration in Zenfi. So let me just publish this so that we can see how this works. So I'll give this a name. I'll call this flow employee onboarding. And I will publish it. And in this pop-up, I'll say complete the registration with the Google form. Perfect. And it's all set up. So let me switch to the Google form. And I'm going to submit a new entry. So for the first name, I'm going to call it Matt Damon, and the email address would be matt@ufe.me. And then the title would be developer, department is R&D, hiring manager name, I'm just going to copy paste this quickly, Audrey Clarkson, and I'm going to put her email address as well. Annual compensation, say 100,000. They're joining our Seattle office. when it'll be the 1st of September, for example, and they require a MacBook Pro 13. So I filled up all the required information and I'm just going to submit it. Perfect. So now I have submitted a new record. So Google will process this and notify Zenfi. So if I go back to the flow list, so here's the employee onboarding, and if I go into that, you can see this is the dashboard for this flow. It has some information about the flow and how many runs it has and all of that. So if I update it, I'll see the runs happening in here. Okay, perfect. As you can see, Google has informed us of the submission. So if we drill into here, you can see the progress of the flow. So we can see that the flow got triggered. We have generated the offer letter and we have sent it for approval to the manager. So if I switch over to the manager's inbox, you can see already there's a task here. It says, "Hi, Audrey Clarkson, please find the offer letter for Matt for the position of developer." And it has the offer letter in here as well, with all the values that are replaced, the date, the salary, the dynamic values that we got, for example, the full name and the manager's name, and for them to sign here as well. So everything looks good to me. So I'll just go and hit the approve button. So all good. So I'll delete this email as well. All right, I'll switch back into Zenfi, and if I refresh the flow, you can see now the manager approval task has completed. It went through the if condition because we approved. It has sent the offer letter for e-signature using DocuSign. So if I switch back to the inbox for the candidate, you can see there's an email from DocuSign, says to review a document. So I'll open this one up. I will accept these, and you can see here's the offer letter, and there's a place for the candidate to sign it. So I will sign it using this signature. You can see it's automatically taken the signed date, and I will finish this as well. That's done, so I can close this, and now I can return back to Zenfi. So once DocuSign processes the submission, it will do the necessary checks, and then it will notify Zenfi to say the document has been signed and it's completed, and then Zenfi will continue from that point onwards. So as you can see now, the offer letter has been signed, so it's completed. It's gone to the next if statement. Because it has been signed, we saved the file. It went to the parallel branch, and we have assigned tasks to the IT to create an account, procure equipment, and also to perform the background check. So in this case, we had assigned these tasks to Audrey. So if I switch over to Audrey and open up her task list, you can see procure equipment for Matt. It's a MacBook Pro 13, and create an account for Mac as well. And also you can see there's an email to complete the background check. Now I can open up the link for that, and I assume that I have gone and done the necessary work in order to do the background check, and it is a pass, and I will attach the certificate as well, and I'm going to submit that. Perfect. So I'm going to just delete this email and switch back into Zenfi. Now, if I reload here, you can see the request background check has also completed. It has saved the file, which is the certificate, and it has sent the welcome email, and the flow is now completed. So let me switch over to Matt's email. You can see there's an email already saying, "Hello, Matt, we are excited to have you on board." And the welcome pack is also attached. So if I open it up, so here's the PDF that we attached. So that basically concludes our demo. So you saw how easy it was for us to drag, drop, and automate this entire process without having to write any code. Now, you know that processes aren't static. there's new requirements, and you have to update the process and evolve it. So this is where Zenfi shines. So for example, let's just imagine that there's a new requirement saying that after we send out the welcome pack, we also want to be able to schedule a one-on-one with the manager. So with Zenfi, you'll simply come and edit the flow and say go to the Google Calendar category and drag drop a create event and just simply configure that. And also, let's say we want to inform the team saying that there's a new member starting on a specific day and the team is using Slack, so you can just drag drop a post Slack message action and configure that. So just with a few drags and drops, you can see the power of Zenfi and how it allows you to quickly and easily automate your process, as well as evolve your process to the evolving needs as well. So let me switch back to the slides. So we have completed part one, which is to automate the process. Now the process is running and you interact with it by submitting a Google form. Managers will get an approval email and you will get documents created in Google Drive. So the next logical phase is being able to answer questions like, where is Jane's application? Or how many candidates are being onboarded next month? So for this, we need to be able to get insights into the process. So the way we go about doing that in Zenfi is we need to identify what are the key metrics that is important for us for this specific process. Now, for this scenario, we could say the candidate name is important. We need to know the department, the start date, the status, etc. Once we know these metrics, what we do is we go and create a Zenfi table so that we can capture all of this information. And once we have captured this information, we can go and create a business dashboard to visualize all of these metrics. And once we can see this information, it is easy for us to identify bottlenecks and to optimize the process. Let's switch over to Zenfi and see how we can achieve this. Now, mindful of time, I have already gone and created the table to capture the metrics that we are interested in. So I'll go to the tables menu and I'll go to employee onboarding. And here you can see I have created columns to capture the full name, the department, the first day, as well as what is the status of the account creation, the equipment procurement, where are we with the offer letter, as well as the overall onboarding status and the hiring manager. Now, creating columns is very straightforward in Zenfi. All you do is click on Add Column, give it a column name. Let me call it status, and then you can choose various types for the column, if it's a text or a number or an option list. Now that we have the table set up, I already have some data in it. So what you would do is you will go back to the flow, and in key places, you will emit values to the table. The way that you do that is by going to the table category and saying create record, and choosing the table. So in this case, it will be employee onboarding, and saying what are the fields that you want to update. So I want to update the full name, department, the first date, and for example, the hiring manager, as well as the onboarding status. And again, I can choose values for them. So for the full name, I will come and say first name space last name from the trigger. And for the department, again, I will use the department from the form. For the first day, again, I will choose the start date. And for the hiring manager, I will use the hiring manager's email. And the onboarding status here, I will say it is in progress. Similarly, throughout different stages, I can go and update that record to, for example, mark the account has been created here or the equipments have been procured, and finally indicating that the onboarding is completed. So when we do that and then run the flow, it will start collecting all of these metrics into Zenfi table. So I'm not going to run that because of time. So let me switch back, and I have already created a business application to showcase these metrics. I'll go and quickly update this list, and I will go into employee onboarding. So this is a business application built up with various dashboard pages. So the first dashboard page basically shows the different employees and the stages they are at. You can show them as a grid. You can show them as a Kanban view. And next page, we have some specific metrics here. So it shows how many applications are there in the various categories, and how many are waiting on these managers. So you can also easily drill into them. So you can see how many are in progress. So there are 2 employees in progress. How many days it's taking on average to onboard. So those could be your key KPIs. You can also create custom dashboards that shows, like if you are the manager, which are the ones that are waiting on you. And you can also display the employees being onboarded on a calendar view, so you can see which employees are being onboarded this month. Also, you could even kickstart the process by embedding the form directly inside this app as well, so that people don't need to remember the location of this form. They can just simply come to this app, and they have all the information in one place that they can start the process. They can go and look at what the status is for specific candidates, etc. So that is the power of Zenfi apps and Zenfi tables. It brings insights into your process that's easily you can emit values and gain insights into your process. You can invite your team members, your colleagues to interact with these apps and for them to gain insights as well. So let me switch back into the slides. So that concludes our final part. So we saw how you can automate a process, and then how we can gain insights into the process, how we can collect key metrics, store them in a Zenfi table, and then visualize them using a Zenfi app. With that, I think we can open up for questions. So let me check all the questions that you guys have sent through. So here's the first one. Can we use Google Forms within the process? Right now, our whole ecosystem is built around it. Is there an easy way to integrate them? Great question. I think this one came early on in the webinar. As you could see in our demo, we ended up using a Google form to kickstart the process. So the answer is yes, definitely. So if you already have investments around your Google ecosystem, may that be forms or sheets or slides, you can definitely utilize them in Zenfi. So if you already have Google Forms created that are collecting user input, you can create flows to start when someone submits the form, just like we did in this webinar. Or if you have data inside Google Sheets, you can use that data inside Zenfi. You can read that information into Zenfi. As well as if you need to update the sheets, you can write that information back into sheets as well. The same goes for slides and tasks, etc. So if you already have investments, you can easily integrate them with Zenfi and progressively enhance them. So let's look at the next question. How can we collaborate within Zenfi? How many users you can add? That's a great question. So in Zenfi, we have a few distinct roles. So the first one is a designer role. So designers are the ones who can drag, drop, and automate a process. Now, in our essentials tier, you're limited to having just one designer per workspace. Whereas if you are in the professional tier, you could have unlimited designers. So you could invite your whole team to participate and collaboratively work on your flows. So the next question is, in the pricing options, can you tell me what a Zenfi workspace is? Right, great question. So a Zenfi workspace is a data sovereignty boundary. So basically, when you sign up for Zenfi, you'll be asked where you would like to place your workspace. Is it so that we have three options? So you can choose US or Australia or Europe. So once you choose a zone, all your data is locked to that zone, so nothing leaves that zone. Right? So a workspace is basically a dedicated tenancy. So in terms of pricing, the pricing works per workspace. So depending on the tier, so you have essentials or professional, you get different features that are enabled in your workspace. So there's a few more questions coming through, but conscious of time, I think we might have to wrap up this webinar. So thank you for everyone who joined and asked questions. For the ones that we couldn't get to answering them, we'll make sure that we follow up with you on email. If you guys have any questions about the information that you saw in this webinar or any other questions regarding Zenfi, please feel free to reach out to us and someone will get in touch with you. So once again, thank you for everyone, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye.